and welcome to Curious Carmen ASMR. My name is Carmen, and today I'll be doing the third installment of a series for Dante's The Inferno. I'll be reading Cantos 10 through 13. I'll also make sure to have the links for you below for the first two installments of this. And let's start. They come to the tombs containing the Epicurean heretics, and as they are walking by them, a shade suddenly rises to full height in one tomb, having recognized the pilgrim's Tuscan dialect. It is the proud Farinata, who in life opposed Dante's party. While he and the pilgrim are conversing, another figure suddenly rises out of the same tomb. It is the shade of Cavalcanti de Cavalcanti, who interrupts the conversation with questions about his son Guido. Misinterpreting the pilgrim's confused silence as evidence of his son's death, Cavalcanti falls back into his sepulchre and Farinata resumes the conversation exactly where it had been broken off. He defends his political actions in regard to Florence and prophesies that Dante, like himself, will soon know the pain of exile. But the pilgrim is also interested to know how it is that the damned can see the future but not the present. When his curiosity is satisfied, he asks Farinata to tell Cavalcanti that his son is still alive and that his silence was caused only by his confusion about the shade's inability to know the present. Now onward down a narrow path between the city's ramparts and the suffering, my master walks, I following close behind. O lofty power who through these impious gyres lead me around, as you see fit, I said, I want to know, I want to understand. The people buried there in sepulchres, can they be seen? I mean, since all the lids are off the tombs and no one stands on guard. And he? They will forever be locked up when they return here from Jehoshaphat, with the bodies that they left up in the world. The private cemetery on this side serves Epicurus and his followers, who make the soul die when the body dies. As for the question you just put to me, it will be answered soon, while we are here, and the wish you are keeping from me will be granted. And I, oh my good guide, I do not hide my heart. I'm trying not to talk too much, as you have told me more than once to do. Oh, Tuscan, walking through our flaming city, alive, and speaking with such elegance, be kind enough to stop here for a while. Your mode of speech identifies you clearly as one whose birthplace is that noble city with which in my time, perhaps, I was too harsh. One of the vaults resounded suddenly with these clear words, and I, intimidated, drew up a little closer to my guide, who said, What are you doing? Turn around and look at Farinata, who has risen. You will see him from the waist up, standing straight. I already had my eyes fixed on his face, and there he stood, out tall, with his chest and brow proclaiming his disdain for all this hell. My guide, with a gentle push, encouraged me to move among the sepulchres toward him. Be sure you choose your words with care, he said. And when I reached the margin of his tomb, he looked at me and half contemptuously asked, And who would your ancestors be? And I, who wanted only to oblige him, held nothing back but told him everything. At this he lifted up his brows a little, and then said, Bitter enemies of mine they were, and of my ancestors, and of my party. I had to scatter them not once but twice. They were expelled, but only to return from everywhere, I said, not once but twice. An art your men, however, never mastered. Just then, along that same tomb's open ledge, a shade appeared, but just down to his chin, beside this other. I think he got up kneeling. He looked around as though he had hoped to see if someone else perhaps had come with me, and when his expectation was deceived, he started weeping. If it be great genius that carries you along through this blind jail, where is my son? Why is he not with you? I do not come alone, I said to him. That one waiting over there guides me through here, the one perhaps your Guido held in scorn. The place of pain assigned him, and what he asked already had revealed his name to me, and made my pointed answer possible. Instantly he sprang to his full height and cried, What did you say? He held? Is he not living? The day's sweet light no longer strikes his eyes? And when he heard the silence of my delay responding to his question, he collapsed into his tomb, not to be seen again. That other stately shade, at whose request I had first stopped to talk, showed no concern, nor moved his head, nor turned to see what had happened. He merely picked up where he had left off. If that art they did not master, he went on, that gives me greater pain than does this bed. But the face of the queen who reigns down here will glow not more than 50 times before you learn how hard it is to not master such an art. And as I hope that you may once more know the sweet world, tell me, why should your party be so harsh to my clan in every law they make? I answered, the massacre and butchery that stained the waters of the Arbia red now cause such laws to issue from our councils. He sighed, shaking his head. It was not I alone who took part, he said, nor certainly would I have joined the rest without good cause. But I alone stood up when all of them were ready to have Florence razed. It was I who openly stood up in her defense. And now, as I would have your seed find peace, I said, I beg you to resolve a problem that has kept my reason tangled in a knot. If I have heard correctly, all of you can see ahead to what the future holds, but your knowledge of the present is not clear. Down here we see like those with faulty vision, who only see, he said, what's at a distance. This much the sovereign Lord grants us here. When events are close to us, or when they happen, our mind is blank, and were it not for others, we would know nothing of your living state. Thus you can understand how all our knowledge will be completely dead at that time when the door to future things is closed forever. Then I, moved by regret for what I had done, said, Now, will you please tell the fallen one his son is still on earth among the living? And if, when he asked, silence was my answer, tell him, while he was speaking, all my thoughts were struggling with that point you solved for me. My teacher had begun to call me back, so I quickly asked that spirit to reveal the names of those who shared the tomb with him. He said, More than 1,000 lie with me. The second Frederick was here, and the cardinal is with us, and the rest I shall not mention. His figure disappeared. I made my way to the ancient poet, reflecting on those words which were prophetic enemies. He moved, and as we went along, he said, What troubles you? Why are you so distraught? And I told him all the thoughts that filled my mind. Be sure your mind retains, the sage commanded, those words you heard pronounced against yourself, and listen carefully now. He raised a finger. When at last you stand in the glow of her sweet ray, the one whose splendid eyes see everything, from her you'll learn your life's itinerary. Then to the left he turned. Leaving the walls, he headed toward the center by a path that strikes into a vale, whose stench arose, disgusting us as high up as we were. Canto number 11. Continuing their way within the 6th circle, where the heretics are punished, the poets are assailed by a stench rising from the abyss ahead of them, which is so strong that they must stop in order to accustom themselves to the odor. They pause beside a tomb whose inscription declares that within is Pope Anastasius. When the pilgrim expresses his desire to pass the time of waiting profitably, Virgil proceeds to instruct him about the plan of punishments in hell. Then, seeing that dawn is only 2 hours away, he urges the pilgrim on. We reached the curving brink of a steep bank constructed of enormous broken rocks. Below us was a crueler den of pain, and the disgusting overflow of stench the deep abyss was vomiting forced us back from the edge. Crouched underneath the lid of some great tomb, I saw it was inscribed, Within lies Anastasius, the Pope Photinus lured away from the straight path. Our descent will have to be delayed somewhat so that our sense of smell may grow accustomed to those vile fumes. Then we will not mind them, my master said. And I, you will have to find some way to keep our time from being wasted. That is precisely what I had in mind, he said, and then began the lesson. My son, within these boulders' bounds are 3 more circles, concentrically arranged like those above, all tightly packed with souls, and so that later the sight of them alone will be enough. I'll tell you how and why they are imprisoned. All malice has injustice at its end, an end achieved by violence or by fraud. While both are sins that earn the hate of heaven, since fraud belongs exclusively to man, God hates it more, and therefore, far below, the fraudulent are placed and suffer most. In the first of the circles below are all the violent, since violence can be used against 3 persons. Into 3 concentric rounds it is divided. Violence can be done to God, to self, or to one's neighbor, to him or to his goods, as my reasoned explanation will make clear. By violent means a man can kill his neighbor or wound him grievously. His goods may suffer violence by arson, theft, and devastation. So homicides and those who strike with malice, those who destroy and plunder, are all punished in the first round, but all in different groups. Man can raise violent hands against himself and his own goods, so in the second round, paying the debt that can never be paid, are suicides, self-robbers of your world, or those who gamble all their wealth away, and weep up there when they should have rejoiced. One can use violence against the deity by heartfelt disbelief and cursing him, or by despising nature and God's bounty. Therefore, the smallest round stamps with its seal both Sodom and Gehor's, and all those souls who hate God in their hearts and curse his name. Fraud that gnaws the conscience of its servants can be used on one who puts his trust in you, or else on one who has no trust invested. This latter sort seems only to destroy the bond of love that nature gives to man. So in the second circle there are nests of hypocrites, flatterers, dabblers in sorcery, falsifiers, thieves, and simonists, panders, seducers, grafters, and like filth. The former kind of fraud both disregards the love nature enjoys and that extra bond between men which creates a special trust. Thus it is in the smallest of the circles, at the earth's center, around the throne of Dis, that the traitors suffer their eternal pain. And I, Master, your reasoning runs smooth, and your explanation certainly makes clear the nature of this pit and its inmates. But what about those in the slimy swamp, those driven by the wind, those beat by rain, and those who come to blows with harsh refrains? Why are they, too, not punished here inside the city of flame, if they have earned God's wrath? If they have not, why are they suffering? And he to me, why do you let your thoughts stray from the path they are accustomed to? Or have I missed the point you have in mind? Have you forgotten how your ethics reads? Those terms it explicates in such detail? The 3 conditions that the heavens hate: incontinence, malice, bestiality. Do you not remember how incontinence offends God least, and merits the least blame? If you will reconsider well this doctrine, and then recall to mind those whose souls were suffering pain above, outside the walls, you will clearly see why they are separated from these malicious ones, and why God's vengeance beats down upon their souls less heavily. O sun that shines to clear a misty vision, such joy is mine when you resolve my doubts that doubting pleases me no less than knowing. Go back a little bit once more, I said, to where you say that the Urshri offends God's goodness, and untie that knot for me. Philosophy, he said, and more than once, points out to one who reads with understanding how nature takes her course from the divine intellect, from its artistic workmanship, and if you have your physics well in mind, you will find not many pages from the start how your art too, as best it can, imitates nature. The way an apprentice does his master, so your art may be said to be God's grandchild. From art and nature man was meant to take his daily bread to live, if you recall the book of Genesis near the beginning, but the Ushur, adopting other means, scorns nature in herself and in her pupil, art. He invests his hope in something else. Now follow me, we should be getting on. The fish are shimmering over the horizon, the wain is now exactly over Charis, and the passage down the bank is farther on. Canto 12. They descend the steep slope into the seventh circle by means of a great landslide which was caused when Christ descended into hell. At the edge of the abyss is the Minotaur, who presides over the circle of the violent and whose own bestial rage sends him into such paroxysm of violence that the two travelers are able to run past him without his interference. At the base of the precipice, they see a river of boiling blood, which contains those who have inflicted violence upon others. But before they can reach the river, they are intercepted by 3 fierce centaurs, whose task it is to keep those who are in the river at their proper depth by shooting arrows at them if they attempt to rise. Virgil explains to one of the centaurs, Chiron, that this journey of the pilgrim and himself is ordained by God, and he requests him to assign someone to guide the two of them to the ford in the river and carry the pilgrim across it to the other bank. Chiron gives the task to Nessus, one of the centaurs, who, as he leads them to the river's ford, points out many of the sinners there in the boiling blood. Not only was that place where we had come to descend craggy, but there was something there that made the scene appalling to the eye. Like the ruins this side of Trent left by the landslide, an earthquake or erosion must have caused it, that hit the Adige on its left bank. When from the mountain's top, where the slide began, to the plain below, the shattered rocks slipped down, shaping a path for a difficult descent. So was the slope of our ravine's formation, and at the edge, along the shattered chasm, there lay stretched out the infamy of Crete. The sun conceived in the pretended cow. When he saw us, he bit into his flesh, gone crazy with the fever of his rage. My wise guide cried to him, "Perhaps you think you see the Duke of Athens come again, who came once in the world to bring your death? Begone, you beast, for this one is not led down here by means of clues your sister gave him. He comes here only to observe your torments." The way a bull breaks loose the very moment he knows he has been dealt the mortal blow and cannot run, but jumps and twists and turns, just so I saw the Minotaur perform. And my guide, alert, cried out, "Run to the pass!" While he still writhes with rage, get started down. And so we made our way down through the ruins of rocks, which often I felt shift and tilt beneath my feet from weight they were not used to. I was deep in thought when he began. "Are you, perhaps, thinking about these ruins protected by the furious beast I quenched in its own rage? Now, let me tell you that the other time I came down to the lower part of hell, this rock had not then fallen into ruins. But certainly, if I remember well, it was just before the coming of that one, who took from hell's first circle the great spoil, that this abyss of stench from top to bottom began to shake. So I thought the universe felt love, whereby some have mentioned the world has more than once renewed itself in chaos. That was the moment when this ancient rock was split this way, here and in other places. But now look down the valley. Coming closer, you will see the river of blood that boils the souls of those who through their violence injured others. Oh, blind cupidity and insane wrath, spurring on us through our short life on earth, to steep us then forever in such misery. I saw a river, wide, curved like a bow, that stretched embracing all the flat land there, just as my guide had told me to expect. Between the river and the steep came centaurs, galloping in a single file, equipped with arrows, off hunting as they used to in the world. Then, seeing us descend, they all stopped short, and the 3 of them departed from the ranks with bows and arrows ready from their quivers. One of them cried from distant post, "You there, on your way down here, what torture are you seeking? Speak where you stand, if not, I draw my bow." And then my master shouted back, "Our answer we will give to Chiron when we're at his side. As for you, I see you are as rash as ever." He nudged me, saying, "That one there is Nessus, who died from loving lovely Deianira and made of himself, of his blood, his own revenge. The middle one, who contemplates his chest, is great Chiron, who reared and taught Achilles. The last is Pholus, known for his drunken wrath. They gallop by the thousands round the ditch, shooting at any daring soul, emerging above the bloody level of his guilt." When we came closer to those agile beasts, Chiron drew an arrow, and with its notch he parted his beard to both sides of his jaws. And when he had uncovered his great mouth, he spoke to his companions. Have you noticed how the one behind moves everything he touches? This is not what a dead man's feet would do. And my good guide, now standing by the torso at the point the beast's two natures adjoined, replied, He is indeed alive, and so alone that I must show him through this dismal valley. He travels by necessity, not pleasure. A spirit came from singing Alleluia to give me this extraordinary mission. He is no rogue, nor I a criminal spirit. Now, in the name of that power by which I move my steps along so difficult a road, give us one of your troop to be our guide, to lead us to the ford, and, once we are there, to carry this one over on his back, for he is not a spirit who can fly. Chiron looked over his right breast and said to Nessus, You go, guide them as they ask, and if another troop protests, disperse them. So with this trusted escort we moved on along the boiling crimson river's bank, where piercing shrieks rose from the boiling souls. There I saw people sunk into their eyelids, and the huge centaur explained, These are the tyrants who dealt in bloodshed and plundered wealth. Their tears are paying for their heartless crimes. Here stand Alexander and fierce Dionysus, who weighed down Sicily with years of pain. And there, that forehead smeared with coal-black hair, is Asolino. And the other one, the blonde, Opizzo d'Esti, who, and this is true, was killed by his own stepson in your world. With that I looked to Virgil, but he said to me, Let him instruct you now, don't look to me. A little further on the centaur stopped, above some people peering from the blood that came up to their throats. He pointed out a shade to one side, alone, and said, There stands the one who in God's keep murdered the heart still dripping blood over the Thames. Then I saw the other souls stuck in the river who had their heads and chests above the blood, and I knew the names of many who were there. The river's blood began decreasing slowly until it cooked the feet and nothing more. And here we found the ford where we could cross. Just as you see the boiling river here on this side getting shallow gradually, the centaur said, I would also have you know that on the other side the riverbed sinks deeper, more and more, until it reaches the deepest meeting place where tyrants moan. It is there that heaven's justice strikes its blow against Attila, known as the scourge of the earth, against Pyrrhus and Sextus, and forever extracts the tears of the scalding blood produces and tears the scalding blood produces from Ranier de Cornato and Ranier Pazzo, whose battlefields were highways where they robbed. Then he turned round and crossed the ford again. Canto number 13. No sooner are the poets across the Phlegethon? Oh, Greek. No sooner are the poets across the Phlegethon than they encounter a dense forest, from which came wails and moans, and from which is presided over by the hideous harpies, half woman, half beast, bird-like creatures. Virgil tells his ward to break off a branch of one of the trees. When he does, the tree weeps blood and speaks. In life he was Pierre de Vigne, chief counselor of Frederick II of Sicily, but he fell out of favor, was accused unjustly of treachery, and was imprisoned, whereupon he killed himself. The pilgrim is overwhelmed by pity. The sinner also explains how the souls of the suicides come to this punishment and what will happen to them after the last judgment. Suddenly they are interrupted by the wild sounds of the hunt, and two naked figures, Lano of Siena and Giacomo de Sant'Andrea, dash across the landscape, shouting at each other, until one of them hides himself in a thorny bush. Immediately a pack of fierce black dogs rush in, pounce on the hidden sinner, and rip his body, carrying away mouthfuls of flesh. The bush, which has been torn in the process, begins to lament. The two learn that the cries are those of a Florentine who had hanged himself in his own home. Not yet had Nessus reached the other side when we were on our way into a forest that was not marked by any path at all. No green leaves, but rather black in color, no smooth branches, but twisted and entangled, no fruit, but thorns of poison bloomed instead. No thick, rough, scrubby home like this exists, not even between Cecina and Cornetto, for those wild beasts that hate the run of farmlands. Here the repulsive harpies twine their nests, who drove the Trojans from the Strophiades with filthy forecasts of their close disaster. Wide-winged they are, with human necks and faces, their feet are clawed and their bellies fat and feathered. Perched in the trees they shriek their strange laments. Before we go on farther, my guide began, remember you are in the second round and shall be till we reach the dreadful sand. Now look around you carefully and see with your own eyes what I will not describe, for if I did, you wouldn't believe my words. Around me, wails of grief were echoing, and I saw no one there to make those sounds. Bewildered by all this, I had to stop. I think perhaps he thought I might be thinking that all the voices coming from those stumps belonged to people hiding there from us. And so my teacher said, if you break off a little branch of any of these plants, what you are thinking now will break off too. Then slowly raising up a hand a bit, I snapped the tiny branch of a great thorn bush, and its trunk cried, why are you tearing me? And when its blood turned dark around the wound, it started saying more. Why do you rip me? Have you no sense of pity whatsoever? Men were we once, and now we were changed to scrub. I really wanted to say shrub. But even if we had been souls of serpents, your hand should have shown more pity than it did. Like a green log burning at one end only, sputtering at the other, oozing sap and hissing with the air it forces out, so from that splintered trunk a mixture poured of words and blood. I let the branch I held fall from my hand and stood there stiff with fear. "O wounded soul," my sage replied to him, "if he had only let himself believe what he had read in verse I once wrote, he never would have raised his hand against you. But the truth itself was so incredible, I urged him on to do the thing that grieves me. But tell him who you were. He can make amends, and will, by making bloom again your fame, in the world above where his return is sure." And the trunk, "So appealing are your loving words, I must reply. Be not displeased if I am lured into a little conversation. I am that one who held both of the keys that fitted Frederick's heart. I turned them both, locking and unlocking with such finesse that I let him few into his confidence. I was so faithful to my glorious office, I lost not only sleep but life itself." That courtesan who constantly surveyed Caesar's household with her adulterous eyes, mankind's undoing, a special vice of courts, inflamed the hearts of every one against me, and these inflamed and turned Augustus, and my happy honors turned to sad laments. My mind, moved by scornful satisfaction, believing death would free me from all scorn, made me unjust to me, who was all just. By these strange roots of my own tree I swear to you, that never once did I break faith with my Lord, who was so worthy of all honor. If one of you should go back to the world, restore the memory of me, who here remain cut down by the blow that envy gave. My poet paused a while, then said to me, "Since he is silent now, don't lose your chance. Ask him if there is more you wish to know." "Why don't you keep on questioning," I said, "and ask him for my part what I would ask, for I cannot, such pity chokes my heart." He began again, "That this man may fulfill generously what your words cry out for. Imprisoned soul, may it please you to continue by telling us just how a soul gets bound into these knots, and tell us if you know whether any soul might someday leave his branches." At that, the trunk breathed heavily, and then the breath changed to a voice that spoke these words. "Your question will be answered very briefly. The moment that the violent soul departs the body it has torn itself away from, Minos sends it down to the seventh hole. It drops to the wood, not in a place allotted, but anywhere that fortune tosses it. There, like a grain of spelt, it germinates, soon springs into a sapling, and then a wild tree. At last the harpies, feasting on its leaves, creates its pain, and for the pain an outlet. Like the rest, we shall return to claim our bodies, but never again to wear them. Wrong it is for a man to have again what he once cast off. We shall drag them here, and all along the mournful forest, our bodies shall hang for evermore, each one on a thorn of its own alien shade. We were standing still attentive to the trunk, thinking perhaps it might have more to say, when we were startled by a rushing sound, such as the hunter hears from where he stands, first the boar, then all the chase approaching, the crash of the hunting dogs and branches smashing. Then to the left of us appeared two shapes, naked and gashed, fleeing with such rough speed that they tore away with them the bushes' branches. The one ahead, "Come on, quickly, death!" The other, who could not keep up the pace, screamed, "Lano, your legs were not so nimble when you were jousted in the tournament of Topo." And then, from the lack of breath perhaps, he slipped into a bush and wrapped himself in thorns. Behind these two the wood was overrun by packs of black bitches, ravenous and ready, like hunting dogs just broken from their chains. They sank their fangs into that poor wretch who hid, and they ripped him open piece by piece, and then ran off with mouthfuls of his wretched limbs. Quickly my escort took me by the hand and led me over to the bush that wept its vain laments from every bleeding sore. "Oh, Giacomo de St. Andrea," it said, "what good was it for you to hide in me? What fault have I if you led an evil life?" My master, standing over it, inquired, "Who were you once that now through many wounds breathes a grieving sermon with your blood?" He answered us, "O souls who have just come in time to see this unjust mutilation that has separated me from all my leaves, gather them round the foot of this sad bush. I was from the city that took the Baptist in exchange for her first patron, who for this swears by his art she will have endless sorrow. And were it not that on Arno's bridge some vestige of its image still remains, those citizens who built anew the city on the ashes of Attila left behind would have accomplished such a task in vain. I turned my home into my hanging place." Thank you for subscribing.